Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Hope the week's gone well. Let's start with some macro thoughts. In case you missed it, Google passed $1,000 yesterday. If you're lucky enough to have bought Google's IPO, then that's a total return of 2,260%. Take a look at this infographic from Holger. Qatar Gas, the amount of gas it supplies to the global market. 11-month forward contracts for the Qatari rial jumped 203 points to 405 points, indicating increased bets Qatar could devalue its currency. So you can see that there's been an immediate reaction in the markets. The stock market fell dramatically. Skepticism is mounting for more Fed rate hikes post-June as US data softens. And you can see that folks are nearly at the point of pricing out any further rate hikes this year. I like this photograph of Lake Magadi, one of my favorite places to visit. This photograph connecting people with nature from Win_Ovi. And this photograph of an elephant from David E. Arrow. Political reflections. Trump's controversial London tweets can't distract from James Comey's testimony this week. That's a biggie. Trump fighting terrorism, or is he just tweeting about it but while making it worse, asks Politico magazine. Corbyn calls on May to quit over police cuts. Asked if he would back calls made by others for May to resign, Corbyn told Sky News, "Indeed I would, because there have been calls made by a lot of very responsible people on this who are very worried that she was at the Home Office for all this time, presided over these cuts in police numbers, and now is saying that we have a problem. Yes, we do have a problem. We should never have cut the police numbers." So there are two issues she's being hit with. One is cutting of police numbers, and two is the lifting of control orders when she was Home Secretary for all these Libyan-type ne'er-do-wells who went to fight Gaddafi. So Corbyn, I think, is gaining traction on this issue. Recent UK attacks have a domestic centre of gravity. This is the London police chief. The 3 attacks carried out by Islamist militants in Britain in the last 3 months have been largely domestic plots, and the majority of the threat facing the country is not directed from overseas, London's police chief said on Monday. All the recent attacks, I think, have a primarily domestic centre of gravity, Metropolitan Police Commissioner Cressy Dick told BBC Radio. They are in the 5 that we foiled, and these 3 recent attacks, and some of them are undoubtedly international dimensions. We will always be looking to see if anything has been directed from overseas. But I would say the majority of the threat that we are facing at the moment does not appear to be directed from overseas. And I go back to that piece I wrote in January 2015 when I spoke about the arrival of the asymmetric threat on the streets of Paris and now London, and how deeply unsettling it was and will surely keep Europe off balance and presages a new normal. Everyone called him Abs. He gave out Halloween candy to children and taught them how to play ping pong. He invited his neighbours to a barbecue. But Khurram Shahzad Butt was not the typical resident of the East London neighbourhood of Barking. He dressed in the religious gown of a conservative Muslim, with a tracksuit and sneakers underneath. He turned up in a Channel 4 documentary, The Jihadis Next Door. And now London's Metropolitan Police have identified him as one of the 3 men who carried out the deadly terror attack on Saturday at London Bridge and Borough Market. And what I find is there's a definite similarity in these sorts of personalities. The brothers Sanev, this was in 2013, and I wrote about them and the long tail, and I said there are more than 7 billion of us now in this 21st century world of ours. The long tail in a population of 7 billion is not an insignificant absolute number. Just 1% of people are prepared to do these crazy things. 7 billion becomes 700 million, 70 million individuals. Cut that down to 0.2, right? Or whatever you want, cut it down to 0.1. Still 7 million. In statistics, a long tail of some distributions of numbers is the portion of the distribution having a large number of occurrences far from the head or central part of the distribution. Put in a different way, there are surely many brothers Tsarnaev in this 21st century of ours. And then I was remembering Albert Camus' L'Étranger, where he said the Byronic hero, incapable of love, or capable only of an impossible love, suffers endlessly. He is solitary, he is languid, his condition exhausts him. If he wants to feel alive, it must be in the terrible exaltation of a brief and destructive action. Don't get me wrong, I do not think any of these folks are Byronic. Diplomatic crisis in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, UAE and Bahrain cut relations with Qatar in a coordinated move. Qatar denounced the move as based on lies about it supporting militants. It has often been accused of being a funding source for Islamists, as has Saudi Arabia. Iran, long at odds with Saudi Arabia and a behind-the-scenes target of the move, blamed Trump's visit last month to Riyadh. What is happening is the preliminary result of the sword dance. Fair point. Look at this tweet from Gorbani Sadek. Javed Zarif just talked with his Qatari counterpart. I'm not sure the Qataris would have been keen for that to have been posted. RT, I've never seen anything like it. Qataris rush to stock up on food ahead of price hike as only land border is now shut. Qatar's big spenders are vulnerable to palace politics whenever a crisis hits the West. The pint-sized yet deep-pocketed nation of Qatar sails into view with the promise of cash lifeboats. Whether it's the 2008 financial meltdown, President Trump's infrastructure plans, or the British EU exit, the promise of Qatari wealth is dangled as a way of keeping government finances and broader investor confidence afloat. The irony now is Qatar has its own trouble. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, UAE and Bahrain have severed most diplomatic and economic ties to their Gulf neighbor to punish it for its ties with Iran and Islamist groups in the region. The move is unprecedented, analysts say. Fears of a regional chokehold on a country that's the biggest producer of liquefied natural gas sent Qatari stocks down and oil prices up very momentarily in the case of oil. I think they can come on. I think the Saudis will put pressure on countries in which they've invested to force them to divest at cheap prices. Dudley NYC, these are currently airborne Qatar Airways flights. It looks like all Qatar aircraft will soon be banned from the area outlined in red. I like this photograph of Megyn Kelly interviewing Vladimir Putin. The dollar index touched a 7-month low ahead of testimony before Congress from former FBI Director James Comey on Thursday. It has been reported that Comey plans to testify to conversations in which President Trump pressured him to drop his investigation into former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn, who was fired for failing to disclose conversations with Russian officials. The dollar is already on the defensive after Friday's jobs data, and now it's facing potential geopolitical risk in the form of Comey's testimony indeed. Currency markets, the euro is at 112.54, dollar index 96.56, the yen, big move below 110, 109.67. 108 is the next target. Swiss franc 0.9633, the pound 129.25. I think it's going down to 128. The Australian dollar, where are we now? 0.7482. A little bit firmer. India rupee 64.345. South Korean won 11.1653. The real 329.76. Egyptian pound 18.1210, and the rand a little bit softer after a strong 1% gain yesterday. It's right up against resistance. Last time I checked, it was at 12.75. It's a trading sell, and if it breaks here, however, you've got to cover back because it can run up to 12 very, very quickly. Dollar index, I'll put up a chart. It's soft in front of Comey, given up all the gains we saw post that Trump rally. FX speculators holding largest net long euro position in 6 years, and barring 1 week in May 2011, the biggest in almost a decade. Interesting, very bullish about the euro. I'll put up the chart there. We're now at 112.53. The target is 114.50. May saw the biggest ever monthly shift towards long sterling positions by FX specs on the CFTC. Net short position cut by 61,531 contracts. That's interesting. Put up a sterling 1 year chart. I think we're going to go to 128. Why do I think that? I don't think Theresa May is going to get a clear-cut win here. The world's $100 trillion question: why is inflation so low? Snap Inc. placed a startup that measures the offline success of digital advertising campaigns for about $125 million. Let's move on to commodity markets. Rafi, who I follow on Twitter, is talking about 13.15, 13.35 being a huge level on gold. Let me put up what he tweeted. As I said, we're around about the 1288.92 level on gold, and it feels very strong as if it wants to go higher. Crude oil, let's take a look at where that is. Crude oil, $47.45 in the States. My target is $32, which I've been telling you about from before. Nobel Group's shares fell to the lowest since 2000. Take a look at what happened here. China is muscling in on the frontier bond market. When the tiny island of the Maldives prepared to make its dollar debt debut last week, it looked beyond more veteran international arrangers to Bocom International Holdings, the securities arm of China's fifth biggest bank. The firm was sole lead on the $200 million 5-year bond, the latest in a slew of frontier market dollar offerings this year. Chinese banks also popped up in Sri Lanka's blowout dollar bond sale last month, with CITIC Securities Company and ICBC part of a syndicate marketing the $1.5 billion issue. Interesting, isn't it? Let's move on to Africa. President of Mali, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, and Prime Minister Netanyahu met this afternoon following the ECOWAS summit. We spoke about that. Interesting move by Bibi. DRC Congo teeters on the edge of catastrophe, says the Mail and Guardian. At the national level, Joseph Kabila is clinging to office after 16 years in power. Despite the end of his legal mandate last December, his actions have triggered a political and constitutional crisis, with elections delayed and protesters shot dead by police. Interesting piece, well worth reading. DRC opposition leader wants protection if he returns. He's not going to get that, is he? So he's not going to return, which is exactly what Kabila wanted to happen on the 6th of June 2016, when I said he outwitted Katumbi by removing him from the street and the Congo entirely. And I called it a cleverly administered technical knockout. And then I was quoting Virilio's book Speed and Politics. The revolutionary contingent attains its ideal form, not in the place of production, but in the street, where for a moment it stops being a cog in the technical machine and itself becomes a motor machine of attack. In other words, a producer of speed. Cobalt has jumped 31% this year on surging demand for the metal used in batteries for electric cars made by firms such as Tesla Inc. It may rise another 60% to as much as $90,000 a metric ton in the next 18 months or so, says ERG Chief Executive Officer Benedict Sobotka. Barclays Africa powers ahead after the parent finally lets go, and this was predictable, and actually I said it was going to happen. Worst performing bank stock in 2017 and 2016 has risen for 3 straight days after Barclays plc sold its controlling stake in a share sale in which demand exceeded supply. South African oil shares up 4.38% this year. Dollar versus rand. Rand is right up against resistance. 1275 got as low as 1267. Egyptian pound 1805. They've really done the right thing from the economy's point of view. Nigerian all share up 21.22% year to date, 23-month highs, and in a bull market. Ghana Stock Exchange up 13.62% so far this year. China is already the second largest bilateral lender, owed $3.5 billion or 19.4% of total external debt by the end of Q2. China awarded Kenya $294.3 billion or 90% of the $327 billion spent on constructing the Mombasa-Nairobi SGR. Apart from the SGR loan, China is already the single largest bilateral lender, owed $3.5 billion or 19.4% of the total external debt by the end of the second quarter of 2016-2017. The government has announced that it's looking to conversion of loans into equity and provision of contingent guarantees for Kenya Airways. Kenya Airways is up 15.38% year to date. We'll have to take a closer look as to how they're going about it. But I suspect they're going to try and, and not dilute as much as they might have. I did an interview with the chairman, Michael Joseph. Do take a look if you're interested. Nairobi all shares up 12.22% year to date, and in a bull market. NSE 20 is up 9.25% year to date. I wrote a piece over the weekend about how Nairobi can learn from Jakarta on food subsidies. And with that, I thank you for stopping by. I really do.